Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and this is a 2014 Lexus GX 460. Now you might think I'm reviewing the GX because last week I had the BMW X5. If you haven't seen that review, then you can find that on my channel. But in truth, the X5 and the GX 460 have really nothing in common with one another. They're just not the same kind of vehicle. Because this Lexus GX 460 is one of the last true rugged luxury SUVs on the market. A lot of people seem to confuse the Lexus GX with the Lexus LX. Let's talk about what the difference is. The Lexus LX you can think of as sort of the Lexus version of the Toyota Land Cruiser. So it has different sheet metal, different interior parts, etc., but it shares the real basis of the vehicle with that Toyota Land Cruiser. The GX, however, shares its internals with the Toyota Land Cruiser Prado, which is not sold in the United States as a Toyota model. You'll find that Land Cruiser Prado available in Europe, the Middle East, and certain other areas of the world. And contrary to what you might find online, the GX 460 is not a Lexus version of the Toyota 4Runner. Although the Toyota 4Runner, the FJ Cruiser, and the GX 460 and that Land Cruiser Prado are all closely related, you can think of the 4Runner and the FJ Cruiser as sort of distant cousins of the GX 460, whereas the Land Cruiser Prado is sort of like the brother from another mother. In truth, because of the size and the rugged off-road hardware that you'll find in the GX 460, there's only one true competitor, and that's the Land Rover LR4. However, because we have this Lexus logo right on the front here, we'll talk about some of the luxury competition like the Escalade, the Infiniti QX80, the Mercedes-Benz GL, and even that BMW X5. However, all of those are a little bit bigger than this. The Escalade is significantly larger than the GX 460, and I'm not really sure how much this competes with the BMW X5. Another decent competitor to the GX 460 is the Jeep Grand Cherokee, especially in the Summit trim. It is still less expensive than the GX 460, and it doesn't seat 7 like this particular vehicle does, but it is still a solid off-road oriented competitor. Lexus refreshed the GX for the 2014 model year, so we get an entirely new front end. We have this incredibly large and bold Lexus spindle grille. That's what Lexus calls this particular design theme. It's received an awful lot of bad press. A lot of people think that it looks like an enormous mouth that's trying to eat people. Call me funny, but I actually kind of like this look. It's definitely different, it's interesting, and Lexus has been accused of being a little bit too boring in the past, and I don't find this boring at all. I think it's really a good move for Lexus. While I am a fan of this front-end design, I have to admit that the profile right here on the front bumper does look a little unusual from the side. Although the GX has a very traditional side profile, the reason I say it's not a direct competitor to the GL, the QX80, or the Escalade is because of the size. This is a full 1 foot shorter than the Mercedes-Benz GL, a full 2 feet shorter than the Infiniti QX80, and 3 feet shorter than the Escalade ESV. It is not a terribly long vehicle overall. This is more of a larger mid-sized SUV, even though we have that third row in the back. The rear of the GX 460 is simple and elegant. We have this very vertical hatch with a separately opening hatch glass, which is a feature that I really like in SUVs. It makes it an awful lot easier to stick cargo inside the back of your SUV. You also will notice something very different about the GX 460 versus other SUVs in America, because this is actually a 5-door SUV, as some people call it, because we have a rear hatch that opens sideways like this in the vehicle rather than coming up like most hatches in America do. If you buy the Toyota Land Cruiser Prado in certain other world markets, they actually put the spare tire on the back. But for the American market Lexus model, we have the spare tire under the vehicle. That's part of why we have this door right here, is that way you can have the spare tire on the back and you can still open it in those other world markets. Now, one big difference between the Lexus and the Land Cruiser Prado is right here under the hood, because whereas the Land Cruiser Prado has a variety of diesel and small gasoline engines, there's only one engine in the GX 460 for America. It's this 4.6 liter V8 engine. It produces 301 horsepower and 329 pound-feet of torque. This is an incredibly smooth V8 engine because it's not really a truck-designed engine. This is actually the engine lifted from the Lexus LS 460, which is their full-size luxury sedan, and all Lexus has really done for it is removed the direct injection system, which drops power down from about 385 horsepower down to 301 horsepower. This has made it only to a 6-speed traditional automatic transmission and only to a standard 4-wheel drive system. That 4-wheel drive system uses a torsion center differential to permanently split power front and rear. It's about 60% to the rear, 40% to the front under normal circumstances, although that torsion center differential can mechanically send power front and rear whenever it likes to, based on slippage. Now, unlike electronically distributing systems, the torsion center differential requires no electronic control systems, which is why they're preferred in vehicles like this, because they're very robust and they require no external control systems in order to function. Staying true to the off-road credentials, Lexus also includes a locking feature in that center differential and a 2-speed transfer case. Rather unfortunately, none of these off-road bits are very good for fuel economy, so fuel economy comes in at 15 miles per gallon city, 20 on the highway with a combined rating of 17 miles per gallon. As I said before, you can consider the GX sort of a cousin to the 4Runner and more of a brother to that Land Cruiser Prado. What that really means is that this is a traditional body-on-frame SUV. It's not a unibody SUV like the BMW X5 or the Mercedes-Benz ML or even the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Now, what does body-on-frame mean? Well, body-on-frame means that the suspension, the tires, the wheels, the axles, the engine, the transmission, all of that is all one piece. And then they put the body of the vehicle on top of that. That means that you could remove the body of this Lexus GX 460 and you could drive the chassis around all by itself. That's not possible in something like a BMW X5 or even a Jeep Grand Cherokee because they're a unibody vehicle. So the suspension components, the axles, etc., they all bolt right to the body, not to a separate frame. Now, having a separate frame is good for certain off-roading conditions, and it does make the frame of the vehicle very rigid and very strong. That's part of why the Land Cruiser Prado has such an off-road reputation in that part of the world. Because of that body-on-frame construction, as well as the fact that it still has a solid live rear axle. Now, solid axles aren't that common anymore, but you'll still find them in pickup trucks, heavy-duty SUVs, things like that, because of their load-carrying capacity. You can put an awful lot more weight on a solid rear axle without too many bad things happening to the suspension dynamics versus a traditional independent suspension. Because of that solid rear axle and the body-on-frame design of the GX, you can tow 6,500 pounds of traditional trailering if you opt for the trailer package. Ours does not have that option on it. One thing to keep in mind is that Toyota and Lexus do subscribe to the SAE standard for measuring towing capacity, and they're basically the only ones that do that at this point. So this 6,500 pounds towing capacity on this vehicle is probably roughly similar to 7,000 or 7,500 pounds on other competing SUVs. Front seat comfort scores 8 out of 10 points. We have a multi-way power adjustable seat. This is not as adjustable as you'll find in BMW sport seats, but it is very, very comfortable. It's very softly padded, very cushy. Now, the base models of the GX don't get real leather, the mid-grade models get real leather, and the upgraded models like this get semi-aniline leather, which is much softer and a little bit more comfortable. The passenger seat in the GX features the same range of motion as the driver's seat, but the driver's seat does get a 2-position seat memory right over there on the door. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column that is powered, and we also have a heated steering wheel option in certain models of the GX. The second row scores 8 out of 10 points. We do have a reclining rear seat back here. That's the most reclined position. And then this is the most upright position available in the GX. These second row seats also slide forward and backward. This is the furthest backward, and this is the furthest forward position. That's so you can give that third row just a little bit more room there in the back. As I said, overall they score 8 out of 10 points. Adults might find these seat bottom cushions a little bit close to the floor, but kids are going to find them a little bit more comfortable. I also have a generous amount of headroom here. The GX 460 is a relatively square and relatively tall vehicle, so I do have about 3 or 4 inches of headroom right over here in this seat. If I move over to the passenger side, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks. I still have about 2 inches of legroom left over there as well. The center position in the second row seat is a little bit less comfortable. The padding is really firm right here in this middle seat. Although I don't have too much of a hump, I still have a decent amount of headroom. And due to the width of the GX 460, you aren't going to be rubbing shoulders too much unless the passengers on either side are terribly large. Rear passengers get a center armrest with 2 very, very large cup holders, although the armrest overall isn't as softly padded as I thought it would be. We do have a very nice feature here, however, in a 40-20-40 folding rear seat back. So this 20 portion folds all by itself, or you can fold it together with this 60 portion of this second row seat. Really helps to be limber to get in this rear seat. So that doesn't describe me, just bear with me for a moment. Now, this front seat is 1 notch forward in its track, so it's not all the way back, and that's suitable for me at 6 feet tall. Now, in this third row seat, I do have an interesting combination of things going on. I have more headroom than you'll find in a decent number of crossovers. So something like a Toyota Highlander, etc., they'd have less rear headroom than this vehicle that I'm sitting in right here. However, I don't have a whole lot of legroom. My legs are just about touching this rear seat back. I still could do this for a few hours in the back, however. One big thing you'll notice is that instead of a rear third row bench, there are actually 2 separate benches going on right here, and they're split right down the middle. That's because you don't have to have both third row seats in place at the same time. That does make it a little bit handier for cargo storage. You can also flip and fold this third row seat from the buttons on the side here or the buttons in the back, if it'll let me do that. You can see this sort of little choreographed dance that seat's doing right there to fold in position. And if you do that, you can store a little bit of cargo right here on this side and still have someone in this seat. That is relatively handy. Overall, I like third row SUVs and I like third row crossovers, even if the third row is really compact like this, because even though they are more of an emergency back seat, at least the car has them. So if you have 6 people that need to go somewhere, you can jam people in the back and take them on that trip without too much of an issue. However, if you're going to try and use these on a regular basis, the people in the back seat ought to be either really small or probably someone like your mother-in-law. In a relatively unexpected touch, these rear seats are also electrically reclined. There's a little button over here on the side and you can either recline or tilt the seat back. This is the most reclined, and then this is the most upright, and really the most uncomfortable position actually. All GX models have standard height adjustable front seat belts, and because we're in the premium trim of the GX460, we have these perforated front seats, and they are both heated and cooled in the front, and the rear seats are just heated. Going a little bit out of order, the outboard seats in the second row also have height adjustable seat belts, which is fairly rare in this segment. The front doors are a combination of mostly soft touch plastics. All the upper parts are soft touch plastic. We have some stitched pleather, real wood trim over there, some metallic accents right there by the door handle. If we move lower down the door, down here towards the speaker grill right there on the lower part of the door, that's where you start finding the hard touch plastics lower in the dashboard on the GX. Moving over to the dashboard, this wood trim doesn't show up too well on the camera, but it is a very attractive mahogany trim. You can either get Bubinga or mahogany depending on the interior of the GX460. And this shot right here, it's really obvious the attention to detail going on in the assembly of the GX460. We have great seams right here. This is soft touched pleather. This is not real leather, this is imitation leather. Soft touch injection molded dashboard, real wood trim, metallic accents, and the soft touch panels go all the way down lower in the dashboard. The GX features a very large glove box. You can see Lexus has their very traditional, enormous instruction manual in the car, and you can fit quite a bit of stuff right there in that glove box. It is kind of an interesting shape because it's more of a tall door and a very tall hatch right inside. One of the big changes for 2014 is that Lexus has brought a refreshed infotainment system. This now operates on the same software that you'll find in the rest of the Lexus lineup, except that it's all touchscreen based. We don't use the Lexus remote touch controller in the GX. If you want to know more about the infotainment options, then go ahead and click on the infotainment link down below and be taken on over to that video. Below that you'll find dedicated climate controls, knobs for the radio. These are heated and cooled seat controls right over here. If we push this compartment open, this is where you'll find the USB input, the auxiliary input, as well as a 12-volt power outlet. And then here we have the heated and cooled seat controls for the passenger. Below the heated seat controls, we have our gear shift. We also have our hill descent control on or off. There's also a crawl mode if you opt for it. That's available as a separate option in this vehicle. We have our low range gearbox right there for low, for high. This particular dial right here controls the active suspension system. Right over here we have our height adjustable air suspension setting, so we can go to the highest vehicle ground clearance, the lowest vehicle ground clearance, or in the middle for regular normal ride height. You can also disable the active air control system right there with that off button. Below the button bank we find 2 very large cup holders. These were easily able to accommodate the largest drinks we could throw at them from takeouts. And then here we have a split. The armrest slides forward and backward for each side, and you can also open it with a lever right there on the front. The GX uses an attractive 4-dial instrument cluster. Right over here we have the air suspension status. So right now we're in the high mode and you can switch it down to normal or on down to low, and it'll blink there while it's adjusting the suspension height. This is our gear position indicator. It shows you via that little dot, as well as the alphanumeric display over there on the left. Zooming out from there, we have a very attractive 4-spoke leather-wrapped steering wheel. This is nice soft touch leather. We also get a wood top and bottom optionally in the steering wheel. Depends on which package you get. Over here we have our radio controls, volume up, down, track up, down, mode, cruise control buttons on this little stalk right over here, voice command button, hang up, pick up button for the phone. These buttons right here control that multi-information display right there in between the tachometer and the speedometer. It's pretty much just limited to certain select vehicle settings as well as the trip computer. This one changes between the vehicle settings and the trip computer. With the third row in place, cargo drops to just 11 cubic feet, which is very small. It's quite similar to what you'll find in the Land Rover LR4, however, because both of them are very similarly sized, and the third row should be considered more of an emergency seat in those vehicles, because you really can't put 7 people and 7 people's worth of cargo in either the LR4 or in the GX460. You'd have to put the cargo up on the roof or something like that, or in a trailer, and then you could carry 7 people and 7 people's cargo. Lexus does give us some additional cargo storage right here behind this panel in the door. This is also where you'll find the first aid kit for the car. Not a whole lot of storage going on there. Behind this panel right here is where you will find the toolkit for the car. That's the tire iron, as well as some of the jack accessories. And right here, this is the hydraulic bar that keeps the door open. So if you're parking on a hill and you push the door open and it wants to close back on you, you can actually rotate this little bar right here and lock the door in place, which makes it a little bit safer to be right behind the door. Lexus only includes a standard tonneau cover and upper end trims of the GX460. So if you're in the base model or the mid-grade models, you will have to pay $150 extra to cover your cargo. Still, the GX460 scores 8 out of 10 points in my exclusive Trunk Comfort Index because this cargo area is finished very nicely. I also like this side opening door because instead of a vertical hatch where you may bump your head or bump items on it, you can close this door very easily from the side. So taller people, taller passengers will probably appreciate this door mechanism more than a vertical hatch. One thing to keep in mind on the downside, however, is that you can't stick things out of this and then drive around with them. You can open this glass separately, of course, and stick stuff out the glass, but you can't stick it out the hatch. Out on the open road, the GX drives exactly like you'd expect a body on frame to drive. There's a decent amount of body roll, there's a decent amount of tip and dive when you brake or accelerate respectively. And overall, there's just a little bit of a disconnected feeling going on with the vehicle. That's very common in body-on-frame SUVs because the steering and the suspension is all connected to the frame and the body sits on top. And it's not exactly a direct connection between everything in the vehicle. So it tends to give the car a slightly isolated, slightly floaty kind of feeling out on the road. Of course, the suspension in the GX460 is also tuned very, very soft. I actually give the ride in this car a solid 9 out of 10 points because this is extremely compliant and extremely comfortable. However, that does take a toll on the handling of this vehicle. I do give this about a 6 out of 10 in terms of handling compared with the other vehicles in this segment. That's not necessarily a problem in the GX460, it's really just a matter of what you're after because there's always a trade-off. If you want better handling, you're going to sacrifice some ride, and if you want a better ride, you're going to have to sacrifice some handling. Compared with something like the Land Rover LR4, the Land Rover tends to straddle the line between excellent ride and excellent handling more closely, so I would give it a lower score in terms of ride, but a higher score in terms of handling. Part of that's also thanks to the fact that the Land Rover has an independent rear suspension and this vehicle doesn't. That does take a little bit of a toll when it comes to handling. Of course, the solid rear axle in the back is really helpful when it comes to towing because solid rear axled vehicles tend to tow just a little bit better than independent suspension vehicles. They tend to distribute the weight a little bit better back there and the load capacity in general tends to be higher. Even if the actual rated load capacity on the vehicle isn't that high, you can generally overload a solid rear axle a little bit more safely than you could an independent suspension vehicle. Again, not that anybody is going to tell you to do that, not that any manufacturer would ever condone such a thing, but in general, that's a little bit easier in a solid rear axle like this. Unlike the four-corner adaptive air suspensions that you'll find in Land Rover models as well as the Jeep Grand Cherokee, this height adjustable suspension only affects the rear axle, so only the rear axle will raise up and down versus that normal suspension setting. That's a little bit more handy when you're towing something, but it's not quite as handy off-road as the Land Rover or the Jeep systems. That air suspension again really helps when it comes to towing, because with the air suspension, the vehicle can reset the rear suspension to the middle of the suspension travel, so that way it's not too low and bottoming out, or too high and topping out on the top of the suspension stops. That really improves handling as well as drivability when you have a trailer connected. This 4.6 liter V8 is buttery smooth. As I said earlier, it's related to the 4.6 liter V8 that's jammed inside the LS460, and you couldn't have a luxury sedan without a very smooth V8 engine. All that's really been done for truck duty is the replacement of the intake and exhaust manifolds with more appropriate intake and exhaust manifolds and the removal of the direct injection system. I'm not quite sure why the direct injection was removed because it does cause a power drop in this engine, but overall there's relatively little difference, and that really pays dividends when it comes to the luxury feel of the GX460. It's very smooth out on the road, and the engine and transmission are very well suited to one another. We scored 0 to 60 in just about 6.7 seconds, which is definitely faster than you'll find in something like the Land Rover LR4. Even though the GX460 is not a terribly light vehicle, it is lighter than that Land Rover, and that really does help acceleration out on the road. The GX scored 7 out of 10 points in my braking test. Even though this vehicle didn't experience too much fade during those tests, the braking distances were a little bit longer than I would like for a vehicle that has a towing mission in mind. Over 650 miles or so, we have been getting between 16.5 and 17 miles per gallon. in the GX. Now, if you think that's bad, it actually isn't as bad as it could be. If you take a look at something like the Land Rover LR4, even though it just got a brand new V6 engine and an 8-speed automatic versus this larger V8 engine and 6-speed automatic, it still scores lower in the fuel economy tests. This is just about 1 mile per gallon less than I got in last week's BMW X5 with its 3-liter 6-cylinder engine and then an 8-speed automatic as well. So in relative terms, this isn't that bad in terms of fuel economy. Now, it's not going to be as good as something like a crossover, so if you're after good fuel economy with 7 seats, then you may want to look at something like an Infiniti JX35, also known as the brand new QX60, that would get you better fuel economy, but it's not going to tow and it's not going to perform like the GX460, and it really doesn't have any off-road ability like the GX460 does either. All GX models get what Lexus calls the kinetic dynamic suspension system. All you really need to know about that is it is a hydraulic type system that causes less body roll in the corners than the system would otherwise give you. So if you look at something without this, like say a Toyota 4Runner that doesn't have the KDSS, because it is optional on the 4Runner, it's not standard, that vehicle does have a significant amount of body roll in the corners. And this has, even though it does have a decent amount of body roll, it's significantly less than that 4Runner without the KDSS system. The way KDSS works is that if we're going around a corner like this one right here and we're turning right on this corner, it's going to naturally cause the right side of the car to lift up a little bit. And what that does in this system is it actually causes more pressure on the left side of the vehicle to help keep that side a little bit higher, and then can actually apply a very small amount of force to help keep the right side down on the road for better adhesion. Even though there is an on-road benefit to KDSS, its primary mission is improving suspension travel off-road while still giving you a decent on-road feel. Because if you're driving off-road, KDSS allows a much greater suspension travel, especially in the downward direction for the suspension, than a traditional suspension would allow. In addition to an absolutely serene ride, the GX460 actually beat out last week's BMW X5 to be the quietest car I've ever tested. Interior sound levels in this car ranked in at 67 decibels, which is very, very quiet for any modern car, and is actually quieter than the last Lexus LS460 that we tested. A decent number of journalists that I've spoke with complain about the GX460. They think that it's some sort of dinosaur, that it should have been sent out to pasture a long time ago, and that it really has no place in our modern vehicular world. But I disagree with that, because the GX460 is exactly the kind of car that I need in my life out here in the country. I need a vehicle that has a decent amount of towing capacity. I really need a vehicle that has a rear air suspension, so even though you're not supposed to do it, so I can overload my tongue weight just a little bit now and then. And it really makes driving a trailer an awful lot easier. This is the kind of vehicle that I would own. And in fact, I actually do own this kind of vehicle. I have a V8 body-on-frame mid-sized SUV. It's a Saab 97X. And so this is exactly the kind of vehicle that I think manufacturers should still be making. I live down gnarly roads like this, I live down gravel roads, and I need a vehicle that can handle this without scraping itself up. I don't take my daily vehicle truly off-roading, and that's why the GX460 again is fine with me, because this really isn't the kind of vehicle that you would take off-roading. The big reason here is ground clearance. With only 8.2 inches of ground clearance, the GX460 really isn't designed for the Rubicon Trail. It's really not designed for rock climbing either. Now, admittedly, a 5,000-pound Jeep Grand Cherokee probably isn't designed for that kind of duty either, but it can do it because it has a decent amount more ground clearance than this. Now, the Land Cruiser Prado on which this is based is more of an off-road focused vehicle. It has more aggressive approach, departure, and breakover angles, and it's not going to scrape itself quite as easily when you take it off-road. Now, there are two arguments. The first argument is that all this off-road equipment is just adding extra weight to the vehicle and is causing lower fuel economy for no added benefit. The second school of thought is the one that I subscribe to, primarily because of where I live and where I drive. If you live on a rural road, or if you live on a ranch or a farm or something like that, and you're looking for more of a commuter vehicle that you can safely drive on rutted roads like this, or even rutted gravel roads or rutted dirt roads, then this is the kind of vehicle that will accomplish that task very, very well. Towing with a trailer on dirt and gravel roads like I do every now and then in my Saab 97X is actually kind of a tricky thing for certain vehicles, especially vehicles that don't have a full-time all-wheel drive system like the one in this vehicle with a torsion center differential. That's part of why I bought my Saab 97 Aero, because it has a torsion center differential, and that really means that you're always giving all four wheels traction, and so when you're towing on gravel and dirt roads, it makes things an awful lot more sure-footed. Lexus has a well-deserved reputation for relative value pricing. Keep in mind this is a luxury car, so talking about value pricing is a very relative thing. Pricing starts at $49,085 for the base Lexus GX460. That doesn't get you leather on the inside. but does get you the all-wheel drive system and a lot of the other features we've been talking about. The premium model bumps that up to $53,795, and that does get you leather on the inside. The luxury package, which is what we're looking at right here, starts at $60,715, and if you fully load your Lexus GX up, it takes you up to $69,928. Now, as tested, this model is $62,028. However, I think that if I were going to buy the GX 460, I would need the fully loaded one. And the reason for that is because the fully loaded model gets one of the optional packages that you don't normally find on the dealer lot. Now, the GX 460 Luxury is already fairly well equipped. It comes with 3-zone climate control, the tonneau cover in the rear, semi-aniline leather, ventilated seats, and heated rear seats. But that's not the package I'm talking about. The package I'm talking about is a $4,340 special order package that gives you the pre-collision system, radar cruise control, lane departure warning, crawl control, all-around camera, and the intelligent high beam package. The big features that I would buy that option for are the all-around camera package. It puts cameras in the side view mirror as well as cameras on the front of the vehicle, so it really helps you not only park the GX 460, but it will help you in mild off-roading situations. I also really value radar cruise control and pre-collision warning. That's definitely a feature I would get on any new car if it was available. Interestingly enough, even at that fully loaded price, the GX 460 ends up being a relatively good value in this luxury SUV segment. It's less expensive than something like that Infiniti QX or the Land Rover LR4, depending on how you configure the LR4, of course, or even that Cadillac Escalade. The Cadillac Escalade's pretty darn expensive. Now, the regular Escalade is a little bit bigger than this, but the Escalade ESV is an awful lot bigger than this. Of course, if you're after the best value, then nothing is going to beat that Jeep Grand Cherokee Summit, because it is considerably less than this GX 460, although you are going to lose that emergency back row. This brings me neatly to, would I buy a GX 460? Yes, I actually would. In fact, I tried to buy a used one about 9 months ago or so before I bought a Saab 9.7 Aero. And the reason for that is it's a great vehicle for towing. It also has an awful lot of room on the inside. It has a very, very durable four-wheel drive system. I don't care that much about the driving dynamics. I mean, it's not that bad. It's obviously not a corner carver like you would find in a BMW X5, but that's not really what I was after. I was after a vehicle that had the hauling and off-road capabilities of the GX 460. Inquiring minds are no doubt now wondering, why didn't I buy a GX 460 if I was shopping for one 9 months ago? Well, the reason is resale value, and this is good for people that are shopping for a GX 460 new, but a little bit bad for people that are shopping for used ones. The resale value in the GX 460 is extraordinarily high, much higher than a lot of the other entries in this body-on-frame rugged SUV category. Part of that's because there aren't too many of them sold, and part of that is because of Lexus's reputation for quality and the overall reputation for dependability and reliability on this and the Land Cruiser platform on which it's based. When everything was said and done, I just couldn't find a GX 460 with an acceptable low mileage figure for a price I could afford, so I had to pass up and get something else. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2014 Lexus GX 460. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can always send me emails to alex@alexandautos.com. You can find me over at facebook.com/alexandautos. I always post the cars that I'm reviewing that particular week over there on Facebook, so you can always comment on the Facebook posts and be part of the review right over here. You can check out the related videos at the end of this video. Of course, subscribe, like this video, comment on the video, share the video with all of your friends, and I'll see you next week. Bouncing like a trampoline, and I get to where I'm going, and I have you trembling. Live fast, die young, bad girls do it well. Live fast, die young, bad girls do it well.